The XN4 data had provided us with an option, but I don't think it would change in all patients with ALK-positive disease. As I stated earlier, that both crizotinib and suritinib is a potential option, but I don't think it's a replacement entirely. On the other hand, when ALK study come out, then that becomes debatable if there is a definite phase 3 study showing anatinib to be superior to crizotinib.
So the results of ASCEND-4 really are quite remarkable, because it takes a more active next-generation drug, suritinib, and potentially moves it into the first-line use. We know from ASCEND-4 that suritinib is better than chemotherapy. It's not yet approved to be used as your first-line therapy, but we expect that to happen. And so what patients and providers will have available to them is the option of crizotinib or suritinib as the first-line therapy. We don't yet have head-to-head comparison data of crizotinib versus suritinib, but we know that suritinib has been a more active drug, appears to get into the CNS in a better way than crizotinib, and so it's likely that that would become the more preferred strategy in the first-line setting.
Right now, most oncologists are still favoring sequential treatment with first generation followed by second generation inhibitors. However, based on ASCEND-4 and other first-line trials that will soon be resulting, I anticipate that we'll be moving more toward upfront use of second generation inhibitors. And so then a natural question that comes up is, what do we do after failure of a first-line suritinib patient, for example? And here I think resistance mechanisms, again, is going to become very important, because understanding why those patients are relapsing on a second generation inhibitor will help us to tailor the selection of the next therapy. In the case of first-line suritinib, I am imagining that, again, we will see a significant proportion of patients developing ALK resistance mutations, for which we will be able to select another ALK inhibitor for them. Some patients may develop MET amplification because suritinib and alectinib, unlike crizotinib, actually do not inhibit MET at all. And MET is a common bypass mechanism, so I actually expect to see MET emerge more commonly after first-line use of suritinib. So that may be there may be a role for combination therapies after failure of a second-generation inhibitor, but we really need to identify the resistance mechanism before knowing what to do.
So the current recognized standard dose of suritinib is 750 daily, 5 tablets taken in the same time. Now, a lot of this patient may actually experience nausea and vomiting rather quickly after ingestion of the drug. And then, so the question is, how can we improve the situation? For such, there is actually a new pharmacokinetic study that actually had just been released. So one of the theory of not being able to give food is that the food is going to increase the absorption of the drug, such that you actually had a higher drug level after you use food and the drug together. So therefore, they suggest you not to do it. But on the other hand, the drug itself may have a local irritative effect if you do not take in any food. So therefore, with this pharmacokinetic study, they actually give a low dose at 450 and allow the patient to take food. So as a result, they will have a pharmacokinetic picture very similar to 750 without the food. So in that case, they serve the purpose of being able to have the same dosage effect, but with less of the GI upset.
ALK is a phase 3 randomized trial conducted in Japan that was comparing alectinib versus crizotinib as first-line ALK TKI in patients with advanced ALK-positive lung cancer. The data that was presented at ASCO in 2016 was data from the second planned interim analysis of ALK. The interim analysis was very positive in favor of alectinib, so in fact the trial was halted at that point. This trial was a little bit different than some of the other trials in the sense that this was conducted only in Japanese patients. The dose of alectinib was different than what is considered the standard dose in this country. So in the ALK study, they used a dose of 300 milligrams twice a day, whereas our standard dose of alectinib is 600 milligrams twice a day. And then I would also note that for patients to be eligible for J-ALK, they actually, most of them had double positivity on the diagnostic test. So they had to be FISH positive as well as IHC positive. And typically for most of our ALK trials, including the global ALK study and the ASCEND-4 study, we really have required typically one positive test. So the testing was different in J-ALK as well. However, J-ALK was very notable because it's a very positive study. The hazard ratio favoring alectinib was 0.34. It was a highly statistically significant p-value. The median progression-free survival with alectinib was not reached at the time of this interim analysis, and with crizotinib, the median progression-free survival was about 10 months, which is in line with other studies of first-line crizotinib. In the subgroup analysis that was done within J-ALK, most subgroups derived benefit from alectinib over crizotinib, but what was particularly notable was the subset of patients who had brain metastases at baseline when they enrolled on the study. And while this subgroup was small, this subgroup seemed to particularly benefit from alectinib over crizotinib with a hazard ratio of 0.08 at that interim analysis, which really shows a tremendous benefit to alectinib, which we know is CNS penetrant compared to crizotinib. The other thing that was important about J-ALK is that, again, a head-to-head comparison, we were able to compare the side effects of alectinib versus crizotinib. And again, in this population of Japanese ALK-positive patients, alectinib did appear to be better tolerated than crizotinib, with fewer requirements for dose interruption or dose reduction. So J-ALK really is very exciting. I think many of us are very excited about the global ALK study, which is similar but has some important differences to this J-ALK study. And global ALK will be comparing first-line alectinib to first-line crizotinib in newly diagnosed ALK-positive patients, and we expect the results to be presented at ASCO this year.